So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to all of you on the last day of STTP on applied computational fluid dynamics for renewable energy and hydraulic machine sector. Today, we have Professor Harjit Nath, who is currently working as an assistant professor at Tripura University. So, I would like to introduce himself. That Professor Harjit Nath is working as I said, that as assistant professor at Tripura University. He completed his BTech from Satyabama University, Chennai. He pursued his MTech degree from NIT Rourkela, Odisha. He is a practical and versatile researcher with significant research interest in fluidization engineering, gasification and pyrolysis, water disinfection, simulation and optimization using Aspen Plus, osmotic membrane and soil amendment using biochar. His professional history includes designing, manufacturing, patenting, and launching products. To highlight few of them, he has been involved into development of COVID-19 warbot and robot made for helping healthcare workers working in a COVID care center in Tripura, which is already implemented at Hapania COVID Care Center, Agartala, from July to 23rd, 2020. And development and also filed a patent for suitcase water purifier cum water purification system. He had also been sponsored by various government bodies and societies for more than rupees 5 lakh for doing project work. He also published book on Indian patenting system, a short review of fluoridized by fluidized bed reactor Aspen Plus simulation in reputed publishing house. He has published 9 research papers in various international journals and published 12 research papers at various international conferences. He had been awarded as Most Innovative Faculty of the Year award in Perficio Award 2020, organized by DHS Foundation, New Delhi, in collaboration with Campbell University, USA. He also delivered various expert talks at reputed universities also. He has also reviewed various research articles for Springer, Elsewhere, and Willis publication. He guided around 8 MTech students. He is also a member of various specific bodies like International Association of Engineers at Hong Kong Chemical, Biological and Environmental Engineering Society, the Institution for Engineers, Indian Institution of Chemical Engineers. He is also a life member of Tripura Chemical Society and Electron Microscope Society of India. So on behalf of ADIT, I, Professor Bhowmik Seth, welcome you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Professor Seth, for your wonderful information. Let me share my particular slide. Kindly let me know if it's visible.
Okay. Yes, it's visible.
Okay. So I have actually logged in using 2 profiles. Using this laptop, I'd be presenting this particular slide, and then I'll be moving on to the other part where I'll be demonstrating some of the items which I'll be actually putting forward in today's talk, and I'll be showing some demo of that particular things using the Aspen Plus software, which is installed in my desktop computer. So I'd be shifting to that computer in the later part of today's talk, and I'll let you know when I'll be shifting. Okay, so first of all, thank you for inviting me to deliver a talk in this particular short-term training program, which is sponsored by AICT, and thank you A.D. Patel Institute of Technology for this invitation. So today's talk of mine is a bit different from the computational fluid dynamics which you had been studying for the past few days. Today's particular topic, I'll be taking you to another perspective of simulation, which is basically a process simulation software, which is very much useful in your day-to-day pedagogical type of studies as well as research. Both you can use it in your industries as well as in your institutes also simultaneously. So you could actually, whatever the classes, the topics you are teaching in your classes, you could straight away put into this particular software, and you could get a very good output related to whether your calculations are correct or not, or whether you are changing one such parameters, what will affect or what will happen to the final products. So all those stuffs we will be discussing in today's talk. This particular talk is actually a combination of two very big subjects. One is a fluidized bed reactor or fluidization engineering, which is itself a 6 months long elective course, which we are offering in our university, as well as various other institutes are also offering a course on fluidization engineering. And the second one is the application of Aspen Plus or the studies of Aspen Plus. So this Aspen Plus simulation software is also like a 15 to 20 days course, basically a very regressive type of a course, which one has to undergo to understand how to work on an Aspen Plus. Nevertheless, today's 1.5 hour talk, I'd like to give you a small glimpse about what is fluidization engineering, in what all aspects fluidization engineering is helping the industries nowadays, and how to simulate such reactors straight away in the modeling environment of Aspen Plus. So the main aim of my today's talk is to basically give you an idea related what is Aspen Plus software, what is fluidization engineering, and how this Aspen Plus software can help you in simulating a fluidized bed reactor in an computer-based software. So let's get started. So all of us know that the dependency on fossil fuel is something which we are planning to gradually decrease day by day. Now, by the usage of fossil fuel, all of us know what are the disadvantages which are related to the fossil fuel, starting from climate change and so on. And there are a lot of other alternate sources of energy, which we basically know as the renewable sources of energy, like the power we are getting from a nuclear reactor, hydrothermal power plants, wind power stations, solar energy stations, geothermal energy, tidal power. And there are a lot of other new renewable sources, which a lot of research is going on to increase their efficiency and to make it use into our day-to-day life as much as possible. One such alternate source of energy is something which is said to be a fluidized bed biomass gasification technology. So this fluidized bed biomass gasification technology basically uses the idea from this fluidization engineering and incorporates it into the gasification technology, which is nothing but the burning of some materials in a controlled environment having controlled amount of oxygen. So it is not a full combustion, neither it is a full pyrolysis, but it is gasification where you have limited supply of oxygen, which leads to the formation of various syngases. The syngases can be in the form of carbon monoxide, hydrogen, and methane. So as we know that they are mostly high calorific value gases, so these syngases could be straight away could be used into the power generation. These are basically said to be the first generation biofuels, and this could be tailor-made to generate this second or third generation biofuels. How it basically works, this kind of an gasifier, you have nothing but it is a very tall type of a column having a distributor plate at the bottom, by which you are actually supplying hot air inside the reactor, and via the screw feeders you can feed the feed materials. The feed materials can be biomass, it can be coal, it can be an co-gasification, which can be a combination of biomass and coal, and then it is being heated and it is being burnt inside this particular chamber, which is said to be a fluidized bed gasifying chamber, and that will lead to the formation of something which is said to be syngases. So here you have the cyclone separator, by which you could separate the burnt particles. That means it will be the dust which will be going out. It could be in the form of biochar, or you can say to be the burnt carbon particles. and from the top it gives you the syngases, which are very much useful into various clean energy generation purposes. Generally we say it to be clean energy generation purposes, where it leads to it can be used for thermal heating, it could be used for electricity generation, it could be used for biofuel synthesis and all those stuffs. And the dust which comes out from this particular burning can be used as a kind of an biochar, which a lot of researchers are currently working on to check whether it is suitable for various soil amendment purposes. Because of its very high carbon content as well as silica content, it has actually resulted to a very good amount of retention of maybe if the soil is having any heavy metals in the soil, then the biochar, because of its high surface area, could be used for absorbing the heavy metals in the soil, so that the plant doesn't get the heavy metal into it. It can also lead to various other research ventures like increasing the water holding capacity, stopping the leaching of the minerals or the fertilizers which are incorporated into the soil for the plant growth and all those stuffs. So this kind of a gasification technology is an 100% all in all utilized technology, where you can make use of any waste. It can be a biomass waste, or if you have the coal, that coal could be used for generation of syngases, and then the biochar could be used for soil amendment purposes. So we'll have a brief insight about this particular technology in our later part of today's talk. Let us consider it into what is fluidization engineering, or how this fluidization engineering is being used extensively in the industries. Moving on, let me give you a small description about what is fluidization and what is the history which is behind this fluidization engineering. So fluidization is basically an unit operation, or it can be said to be an operation by which the solid particles are transformed into a fluid-like state through suspension in a fluid. So it is nothing but you have a bed of solid particles. You are making the solid particles to behave as if it is a fluid, because we know that for a fluid the mixing is always a good compared to an solid particles. So this fluidization operation makes use of a special technology by which the solids are made to behave like a fluid, and as such the name is coming fluidization engineering. So this method of contacting has some unusual characteristics, and the fluidization engineering puts them into a very good use. This fluidization engineering was first incorporated in Germany by Winkler in the year 1920, where it was initially used in the field of catalytic cracking process. Gradually, in the year 1940s, the fluidized bed technology was commercialized in a very massive scale, mostly in the petroleum industry, to effect the intimate contact between the catalyst and the hot vapors in the cracking of heavy hydrocarbons to fuel oil. And after that, by the year 1980s, there was a huge explosion in the research as well as the applications and commercialization of the fluidized bed process. In our country, India, there is a research group in Dhanbad, which is the CSIR, Central Institute of Mining and Fuel Research, Dhanbad, with whom we are actually collaborating for the time being to develop a fluidized bed reactor which can make use of our high-ash Indian coals, so that we could generate energy in the form of electricity by making use of this fluidized bed gasification technology, so that we could have the syngases produced, and the syngases could be used into a gas generator to generate electricity, and that could be used for electricity generation. So we are working very closely in developing this technology straight away. And by this term fluidization engineering or fluidized bed reactor, some of us, I'm sure, do have an idea related to what is a fixed bed and how it is different from a fluidized bed. Okay, so for a fixed bed, what you have is basically you have some packings inside a bed, where these packings will give you an environment for your reactants to mix, and the products, when it is formed, it could be taken out from the reactor. And when you say a fluidized bed reactor, this is also a type of a reactor, but here you don't have any packing materials inside. Rather, you have the bed materials where the bad materials are being fluidized by an incoming stream of gas. It can be a gas, it could be a liquid also. And when it goes inside the reactor, both of them mixes together, and then the products are formed, which could be taken out from the top of the reactor if it is a continuous reactor, or if it is a batch reactor, it could be taken out from the bottom of the reactor using some design assemblies. But the main advantages of using a fluidized bed reactor compared to a packed bed reactor is due to the reason that here the pressure drop delta P is actually very high. But in the case of fluidized bed reactor, the delta P is quite moderate. It is not very high. So let us now understand how a fluidized bed reactor basically works on. So here you could see that if you have a fluidized bed reactor, this is nothing but this is a tall column reactor where you have the distributor plate here, and you have the fluid. It can be a gas or it can be a liquid coming inside the fluidized bed from the bottom of the reactor. And when these gases or the fluid is coming inside the reactor, it comes and it contacts with the stream of solid particles or the bad materials which is available inside the bed, which is in solid state. Now when the gas velocity is increased till a certain extent, what happens? This particle starts vibrating in its original position. What happens? A situation will come when you are increasing the gas flow rate or the fluid flow rate. The drag force which is given by this particular fluid becomes equal to the gravitational force of this individual bed particles, and then they will start to move in its mean position. That particular situation is said to be minimum fluidization condition. And if you are increasing the gas flow rate or the fluid flow rate above the minimum fluidization condition, what you basically have is said to be an expanded bed or expanded fluidization, where you could see that there are some instabilities are formed in the form of small bubbles. You could have this dense zone, which can be said to be an emulsion phase, and in between these particles, whenever these gases or fluids are moving inside this bed, along with this fluid, the solid particles are also moved along the bed, and that will help to have a very good kind of a mixing inside the bed, and that will act as a reactor inside the bed. So this type of a fluidized bed reactor is having its own advantages and disadvantages. I would like to concentrate more into the usage of a gas solid fluidized bed reactor instead of a gas liquid fluidized bed reactor, because this kind of a reactor is mostly used in the industries, and we would like to concentrate our studies today in this particular field of gas solid fluidization, as well as we will be solving this gas solid fluidization in our Aspen Plus environment also. Okay, moving on. Now you could see in this particular picture how this bed of solid particles are now behaving like a fluid. So initially it was a bed of solid particles, powdered particles, and when you are increasing the gas flow rate from the below, now you could see how this bed is behaving. It is basically now behaving as a kind of a fluid, and as such the name is coming as fluidization engineering. Though it looks pretty simple that whenever you are giving some fluid, or it can be a gas or liquid coming through the bottom of the reactor, but there are a lot of other technical difficulties which are actually encountered while practicing fluidization engineering straight away into the industries, and we would like to see some of such important factors which are very important to have a very good fluidization. Because if you have a very good fluidization, that will lead to a very good environment of mixing, and that will give you the desired products coming out of your reactor. Moving on. So some of the advantages of using this fluidized bed reactor is that you have the uniform particle mixing happening inside the reactor. There are no temperature hotspot, or you can say that you will have a very uniform temperature gradient throughout the reactor, whatever location you are taking, because of its very high good amount of mixing. It could be straight away used as a very continuous type of an operation, where continuously you are feeding in your feed materials and your products are being delivered out of the reactor continuously. You can make it a batch reactor also. You can also make it a continuous state. So it could be also used into large scale operations also. And because of its tubular structure, it doesn't take much of a space inside your laboratory, or you can say in your industries. So these are some of the advantages. Now, let me give you an idea about in which all fields this particular fluidized bed reactor or fluidization engineering are being extensively used nowadays in the industries. Some of you might be well aware of this particular technology. Still, I'm giving you some idea. It could be used in the industries for making polymeric materials. For example, during the production of silicon for the semiconductor industry, they make use of fluidized bed technology. For the chemical synthesis like the Fischer-Tropsch synthesis, as well as the calcination, roasting of sulfide ores, chlorination, synthesis of hydrocarbons, they can make use of this fluidized bed technology. They can make use of this technology for coal gasification, thermal cracking, fluid coking, as well as the catalytic cracking, FCC production of gasoline from oil. It can be used in the field of combustion for coal combustion, solid waste incineration. It can be used for steam raising. It could also be used in the field of biochemical field also, where it could be used for the cultivation of microorganisms for the food and pharmaceutical industries. They are basically said to be a biochemical fluidized bed reactors. As well as it could also be used in various physical operations like coating of metal objects, drying of solids, adsorption of solvents, granulation, as well as this kind of technology is also seen very extensively in the field of pharmaceuticals for coating of their tablets. So whenever you have the tablets in the granular form, the coating is being generally done using this fluidized bed technology, where these particles, when it is in its fluidized state, by a sprayer, the coating liquid is being sprayed on top of the particular tablet, and as such, because of its very good type of a contact as well as behavior inside the bed, which they actually maintain using a very complex type of a phenomena, they could actually coat the tablet in a very uniform and in a good way. So these are some of the applications where this fluidized bed technology are being very extensively used. Apart from that, a lot of research is going on into this area for various other purposes also, right? So moving on, let me show you a very small video about how does a bed behave when you are allowing fluid come into it.
FBC uses a technique which was first applied by the oil industry in the 1930s and has since been applied to solid fuel combustion. If a gas is passed through a bed of particles...
Professor Bhomik, is the video visible to everybody?
Yes, sir.
What about the sound? Is it audible?
Yes, it is audible.
It is audible. Okay, thank you so much. So do let me know if there's any technical problem, or if there's any question from somebody. I would like to stop myself there and I would be happy to answer. So do let me know. You can stop me in between.
Okay.
Industry is that of fluidized bed combustion, FBC. FBC uses a technique which was first applied by the oil industry in the 1930s and has since been applied to solid fuel combustion. If a gas is passed through a bed of particles, the particles become suspended in the gas and are constantly mixed together in the upward gas stream. In this state, the mixture behaves much like a boiling liquid and is said to be fluidized. In a fluidized bed boiler, coal is burnt in a bed of ash and limestone. By immersing water pipes in the bed, the heat can be used to produce steam to drive a conventional steam turbine. In circulating FBCs, CFBCs, high-velocity flue gases circulate limestone and unburnt solids through to cyclones, where they're separated from the gas and recycled to the combustion chamber. In a pressurized fluidized bed combustor, PFBC, combustion air at a pressure of 12 to 16 bar is delivered to the bed. Crushed coal and limestone, sometimes mixed with water to form a pumpable paste, is fed into the fluidized bed. The temperature of the fluidized bed is kept at about 850 degrees centigrade. Fly ash is removed from the combustion gases in cyclones. The pressurized gases then drive a gas turbine, which supplies fluidizing and combustion air to the combustor and powers a generator. Heat extracted via tubes in the fluidized bed and also recovered from the gas turbine exhaust, raises superheated steam, which generates electricity through a traditional steam turbine. FBC has several environmental advantages over conventional combustion techniques. Fluidized beds typically operate at around 800 to 900 degrees centigrade, below the temperature at which ash melts. This lower temperature also minimizes the formation of nitrogen oxides. Limestone mixed with the coal reacts with the sulfur oxides formed during combustion. Over 90% of the SOx formed can be removed. The solid residues can be used for road construction and landfill. FBCs are well suited to burning low-grade coals or those with a high mineral matter or moisture content. PFBCs using combined cycle electricity generation yield efficiencies of 46% or more, which means lower CO2 emissions. Electricity is produced by harnessing energy to provide the motive force to rotate a generator. This can be achieved by using the expansion of either steam or gas through a turbine. Steam turbines operate at high pressures and low temperatures, but a substantial amount of energy is lost when the steam is condensed at the end of the steam cycle. Gas turbines operate at higher temperatures, but lower pressures, and there is considerable heat loss from the high temperature of the exhaust gases. In a typical combined cycle, high-temperature exhaust gases from the gas turbine are used to generate steam, which then drives a steam turbine. In this way, much of the waste heat from the gas turbine is recovered. Less steam is...
Okay. So as you could see from this particular video, how extensively this particular technology is being used for the generation of energy in the industries, and how a bed of solid particles are being made to behave as a fluid by using this fluidization technology. Let me show you one very small clip, which you will see that you basically have this is a laboratory based setup which we are having in our laboratory here. Here you could see this is a cold model, or you can say to be a model where you can actually visualize and see what is actually happening inside the reactor when you are having a bed of particles. So these bed of particles are nothing but these are a bed of red mud particles, RED, which we have obtained from the industries, and we have actually grounded that into the Galdart B classified powders. I'll come into it what is Galdart B classified powders, and we are trying to fluidize it by using compressed air, which is passing through a rotameter. You could see this rotameter knob will be moving up as we are increasing the flow rate of the air coming inside the bed. And when this air is passed through a distributor plate which is connected at the bottom of this particular bed, and when you could see that this particular airflow rate is increased, this bed height as well as this bed height will now increase from its initial position to an extended position. And the pressure drop could be calculated by using a manometer. You could see this manometric fluid will also be moving when we are increasing the flow rate. Kindly have a look how this thing is working. So initially we are increasing the flow rate, and you could see how this bed is behaving. Now you see it is we are increasing the flow rate, and as this flow rate is being increased, you could see this bed is now expanding. And as this bed is expanding, you could see there is a pressure drop which could be calculated by using this manometer. So as you are keeping on increasing the flow rate, you could see this bed how it is behaving. So now it has become a turbulent kind of a bed with very rigorous or very regressive type of a mixing happening inside the bed, and that's how this fluidization is actually happening inside. So the entire aim of studying this fluidization engineering is actually to make use of this kind of a bed, so that we can have a very good fluidization inside the bed. And there are lots of other factors which are very important to have a very good kind of an fluidization, how you are seeing it here. So this is a very, very basic laboratory based setup, which I was just planning to show how these things are working. This particular video will show how those particles are coming and mixing with each other So there will be a very microscopic view, not a macroscopic view, but using a camera this particular video was taken, and you could see how those particles are actually coming and mixing with each other, and because of which we can expect that very good kind of a mixing is happening. So this is recorded at 1000 frames per second, how those particles are moving. You have the gas coming inside the bed, and now you could see that how those particles are coming, and the solid particles are mixing with each other very reversibly inside the bed. Various kind of simulations were actually used in this kind of studies to actually show how the fluid particles are moving. I'm sure as ANSYS would have also helped you in estimating that. Now you see when these particles are moving inside the bed, how it looks like. If you are zooming in more and more, these small particles are nothing but these are the bed materials, which can be your reactants. Let us zoom it more. Now you could see how those particles are freely moving inside this reactor, and they are colliding with each other during this movement. So the more the collisions, the more better will be the product yield that we can expect. So this is how these small particles are coming and reacting inside this reactor, and that's how we can say that this can be one of the advantages of using this fluidized bed technology. Now with all those stuffs, something more important which we have to know is that what type of powders or what size particles one must use in the fluidized bed reactor so that you could have a very good fluidization environment inside the bed. Now Galdert in 1963 is probably, if I'm not wrong, had published one paper in the journal Powder Technology, where he had classified powders into 4 different grades depending on its size as well as its density. Let me give you a small hint. He had divided powder in the form of Galdert classification A, which is said to be the aeratable, Galdert classification B, which will be bubbling, classification D, which is said to be spoutable, and classification C, which is said to be cohesive. What are that? This particle, which is said to be the aeratable particle, lies in the range of 30 to 100 microns. For example, milk powder. The bubbling particles are in the range of 100 to 1000 micron size. For example, sand. For the spoutable materials, it is greater than 1000 microns. You can take an example of coffee beans. And when the size of these particles are less than 30 microns, it is said to be cohesive. Why cohesive? Because these particles are always having an interaction among themselves. They have an attraction among themselves, and they comes and gets attracted with each other, and as such, this is said to be cohesive in nature. For the aeratable one, the attraction is there, but still it is not that significant. For bubbling, it is much less, and spoutable, you can't see that. So if you are adding them up into a small, this can be said to be a small figure where you could see that the size of the particles are there in the right hand side, and the left hand side you have the density. And this is how it has been segregated: group A, group B, group C, and group D. Generally for our fluidization purposes, we make use of the group B, which is said to be bubbling, and group A, which is said to be aeratable. That means by air it could be usually it could be moved into the gasification or the fluidization environment. Spoutable is not used because of its size. The more the size, it leads to a very bad fluidization, and you need more energy for it to fluidize inside the bed. And for cohesive, what happens, the pressure drop is very much high because these particles are having very high cohesive nature among itself, and they comes and gets attracted with each other, and as such the fluidization becomes difficult. So in the industries, we prefer using this aeratable grade A as well as the bubbling grade. If the size is between 30 to 100 microns, we say it to be aeratable, and for the bubbling it is between 100 and 1000 microns. Moving on. Now, if you concentrate into this particular picture of this fluidized bed, initially, let us concentrate into the gas solid fluidized bed mostly, but this will give you an idea about the entire gas or liquid based fluidized bed. You could see that whenever you have the bed particles inside your fluidized bed here, you could see that whenever this gas or liquid is coming inside the bed, initially when the gas or the liquid flow rate is very low or the velocity is very less, what happens, the gases and the liquids will only pass through the vacant spaces between these powdered particles and it will go up. That means the bed height, which is denoted by LM, will stay same. It will not change. But as you keep on increasing the fluid flow rate, you will see that the bed will attain, or it will start vibrating in its own position when its weight is being counterbalanced by the drag force which is being exerted by this gas or the liquid medium. And these particles will now start vibrating, and you could see that the bed has now expanded a little bit. This particular situation is said to be the minimum fluidization condition. And then you could see this particular situation, if you have only liquid coming inside your bed, you will see that some phenomena which is said to be a smooth fluidization is generally seen if you have the liquid coming inside the bed. But if you have a gas coming inside the bed, you could see that some bubbles are being formed inside the bed, which is said to be bubbling fluidization. And these bubbles are nothing but these are actually some vacant spaces inside the bed, or you can say it to be the due to the instabilities, whatever, some spaces are being created, that spaces are said to be the bubbling fluidized bed. So bubbling fluidized bed is the one which we are concentrating in today's talk. And you could see that this is encountered whenever you have the gas coming inside the bed, because this is the bed which is being used extensively in the industries nowadays due to various reasons. Now, there are various other forms of fluidized bed, like the slugging bed, where you could see that when the gas flow rate is, when the gas is coming inside the bed, you could see that the instabilities or the vacant spaces of the bubbles are very high in size. It is almost taking the entire reactor. This is said to be axial slug. And some situation might happen where instead of having a good fluidization, you could see some bubbles are being formed, and after that you could see there is a vacant space. That means all the materials are being pistoned up, or they have been taken up into the bed, and this particular space is left vacant. There is no reaction happening inside, there is no mixing happening inside. So this is what is said to be slugging, and we are and the entire engineering will depend on to prevent this slugging behavior, so that we could have a good reaction environment. And if the gas flow rate is very, very high, what will happen is that these reactants will be mixing with each other in a very regressive way, and this might damage the internal walls of your this fluidized bed, as well as the particles might break also. There are a lot of other disadvantages which are there into turbulent fluidization, and that's why the most of this work is of this engineering is to limit our entire thing in this bubbling range, which is said to be bubbling fluidization range. Sorry. And for the lean phase fluidization, as I said, if you have the gas or liquid of very high velocity, what will happen? The next stage of turbulent is a lean phase fluidization, which is said to be the pneumatic transport, where due to the very high flow rate of the fluid materials, what will happen is that most of these solid particles inside the bed will move out of the bed, and very less amount of the particles will be left behind, and that is said to be pneumatic transport. So we don't want the flow rate to be that high that it becomes a pneumatic transport. We don't want the flow rate to be that high that it becomes a very, very turbulent based, but we want a flow rate in a range so that it is in between this minimum fluidization and the bubbling fluidization regime. So that is what is actually expected. Now, this minimum fluidization velocity could be easily calculated by using a pilot based setup, the setup which I had showed some time back, where if you could measure what is the inlet velocity of the air which you are allowing to pass into the bed, and if you are constantly measuring the pressure drop, you will see as you are increasing the flow rate, or as you are increasing the velocity of the fluidizing air, you could see that the profile is moving in this particular direction. It is moving up linearly. That means is increasing the velocity, your pressure drop is increasing till certain extent, and after that you could see it is now gradually taking an profile in like flattish profile over here. So this particular range is nothing but this particular range is said to be the range of minimum fluidization. This is said to be the range of minimum fluidization. What happens here? This particular range will signify that the bed has now moved from the minimum fluidization behavior to an bubbling fluidization, or you can say it to be an expanded bed fluidization behavior. So if you are able to draw a graph in this way by measuring the pressure drop and the velocity, you'll get a profile something like this, and the position at which it will start getting flattened up, if you are taking it down and measuring at what velocity it is happening, that particular velocity will be said to be the minimum fluidization velocity. So this is experimentally determined from the experimental setup itself. Now scientists have been working very rigorously to find out how to find out the minimum fluidization velocity using mathematical equations. Then people have determined that UMF, which is said to be minimum fluidization velocity. Why it is important? Because our entire fluidization is said to be good whenever it is more than this minimum fluidization velocity, and there is another velocity is said to be the terminal velocity, and the entire flow velocity of the incoming fluid has to be in that particular range, and as such this estimating the minimum fluidization velocity is very much important. This particular thing will be evaluated straight away into the Aspen Plus simulation also, but before going into it, let us have a small understanding about what is this minimum fluidization velocity and how it is being calculated. So this minimum fluidization velocity in this case could either be calculated by using experiments or using this particular formula, where dP is the particle diameter, rho s is the density of the solid materials inside the bed, rho g is the density of the fluid, it can be the gas or it can be the liquid, g, as we know, acceleration due to gravity. We have the epsilon, which is said to be the bed porosity. Now the bed porosity is something like you have the solid particles inside, you have the small pores here, these vacant spaces will constitute the pores. So if one knows what is the porosity in this bed, then one can estimate what is epsilon. So here it says to be epsilon mf, which is said to be the bed porosity at minimum fluidization. So, and then you have phi s. So this phi s denotes nothing but it is again the size of this particle. I'll come into this phi s part later, or you can say it to be the sphericity of the particle, as we all know. If phi s is equal to 1, it is a perfect sphere. If it is less than 1, then it is not a perfect sphere. That is what is meant by the sphericity. And then you have the viscosity mu here, and epsilon mf is already there. So one can estimate the minimum fluidization velocity for a particular bed depending on all those parameters, provided the Reynolds number at minimum fluidization condition is less than 20. But if the Reynolds number is greater than 20, then one has to use another formula which makes use of a number which is said to be the Archimedes number, and then one can find out what is the minimum fluidization velocity for that particular case. So Aspen Plus also makes use of this particular formulas which are inbuilt into its directory, and it could clearly estimate what will be the minimum fluidization condition, provided you have to give the data regarding to what is the diameter of the particle, what are the density of the solid and the gas, what is the viscosity, and what is the epsilon mf and all those stuffs. So this process simulation will do nothing but it will calculate the same thing which you can do into a pen and paper, but in a very faster and a very quick way. We'll come into it after some time, right? So this is how a fluidized bed works, or a little bit the idea of this fluidized bed. Now you could see this is a typical example of a bubbling fluidized bed, where you could see the bubbles are being constantly formed. So that means these particles are in that bubbling regime, 100 to 1000 microns. That's why you could see these bubbles are being formed. Okay, otherwise this kind of a behavior is not been observed. Then I said that there are sluggings are being formed. You could see how the slugs are being formed and why the slugging are very unimportant for this kind of an fluidization phenomena. You could see that as the airflow rate is increasing, you could see these instabilities or the bubbles are being formed, and gradually these bubbles are so big in nature that it is taking the entire reactor or the entire bed, and that will hamper the effective mixing of the particles inside the bed, and that is what is not desired. So one has to keep sure that this slugging is not happening. There are a lot of other ways by which this slugging could be avoided, and that could be done. Moving on, this is a typical example of a circulating fluidized bed, where this bed of particles, due to its velocity, you could see that it is mixing with each other. And if the upper part of this bed is being closed, and if you are allowing it to pass it through a cyclone separator, you could see these particles could be recycled back into the reactor, and the gases which are coming inside could be removed from the top of the cyclone separator. So this is a typical example of a fluidized bed reactor, basically a circulating fluidized bed reactor, which is mostly seen into the industries. because some problem might happen that some of the particles, say for burning of coal, that some coal particles might be present inside this reactor which is still unburnt. So if you're simply letting it out from the reactor, then the entire efficiency or your utilization is very less. So instead of that, if you have a cyclone separator, the unburnt particles could be recycled back to the reactor, and that will lead to a very good efficiency of the reactor. The coal particles will be burnt fully, and that's why the circulating fluidized bed is being used nowadays in the industries. Now moving on, whenever we say that fluidization engineering or fluidized bed technology, as I have said, that you need to know what type of distributor is there by which your particles are your air or the fluid is coming inside your bed. For example, if you look here, this can be said to be the distributor plate. This can be said to be the distributor plate. This can be said to be the distributor plate. Now, why studying this distributor is very important, because depending on the geometry of the distributor, fluidization operation or the fluidization environment is actually very much dependent on. If you are not using a very good type of a distributor or an appropriate distributor, you will not get a good fluidization inside that. So Aspen Plus also uses the same method to actually calculate what is happening inside your bed. For example, the distributor could be made use for small scale fluidization inside your laboratory or for industrial operation. Like for the small scale fluidization, the distributor plate could be a porous plate, it could be a ceramic or sintered one, it could be a filter cloth, it could be a compressed fiber, it could be a compacted wear plate, and so on. Because in the laboratory based studies, we don't have very high pressure or the very high flow rate, so that kind of an distributor plate is sufficient enough to handle that operations. But in the industries, as we have more feeds coming inside the reactor, we have the more air to be flowed inside the reactor, very high temperature is there and all those stuff. So using this kind of an distributor is not preferred. Rather, we go for some other industrial distributor which can be in the form of perforated or multi-porous plate. This perforated plate can be in the form of a sandwiching plate, where you have the small metal screen in between two sandwiching plates which are also perforated. You have the staggered one, you have the dished one, you have the grate one. So this particular picture is from the sandwiching one, and you could see that this is the distributor plate, and air or the fluid is being passed through one side of the distributor plate, and due to this distributor plate, the air will be evenly distributed throughout the reactor, and you can have a very good reaction environment inside your fluidized bed reactor. Now, the other types of industrial scale fluidized bed distributor plates can be in the form of an which is said to be caps and towers. So these caps and towers can be in the form of multiple porous plate. It could be in the form of nozzle type. It could be in the form of bubble cap type. You could see how it is here. This is the porous one. This is the nozzle type one. This is the bubble cap, and this is the slit nozzle. Now, each and every one of the this type of distributor plates are having its own advantages and disadvantages. When somebody is making use of this kind of a reactor, or when somebody is designing a reactor, he has to take into care what is the operating condition at which this reactor is going to have to occur, and which type of distributor plate is more suited for that operation. So that is again a separate subject for study. Now, when these gases are coming and getting distributed through the porous plate, one can easily calculate what will be the velocity of these fluid particles which are coming inside the bed. What will be the velocity of that particle, and what will be the movement of the particle through each of these porous plates. I'm not going into this particular section right now. This particular picture will show you how these bubbles are being formed, keeping into consideration if you have a solid gas fluidized bed or a gas solid fluidized bed where bubbles are being formed, keeping into consideration that our powders are in the form of group A or group B. You could see for a porous plate type, you have very small bubbles are being formed here, and as it keeps on going up, this bubble size are increasing. I'll come into this fact why these bubble sizes are increasing, but you could see this is the nature of the bubbles which are being formed if you use a porous plate. For a perforated plate having a single perforations, you could see one plume is being formed here, and then this plume gets discharged from this particular plate, and it forms a small bubble, and it goes up. You could see that most of these solid particles are coming and getting accumulated here. So this particular position, you are not getting a good mixing. Again, in porous plate, you could see that this particular section, a lot of bubbles are being formed. You don't expect this kind of an behavior inside fluidized bed. You basically want a very homogeneously kind of an environment inside. For nozzle type, you could see that this air will be coming and going out from this nozzle, and from the exit of this nozzle, you could see this bubbles are being formed and it is going up. You could again see there are also the accumulation of some particles here which are not participating into the reaction. And then you can have the bubble cap type, where you will have the bubble cap system of this discharge, where you could see these bubbles are being formed and then it is going up. So depending on what type of environment you are actually expecting, or what type of reactants or what type of feed materials you are putting inside your reactor, this particular distributor plate has to be selected. And accordingly, there are a lot of other design considerations one has to consider in designing that. And due to this type of distributor plate, the behavior of the bubbles will also change accordingly. So there is also a part of study which one has to keep into mind while designing a fluidized bed reactor. Now let us move on and understand what are the things like the entrainment and what is the TDH. Now you could see that inside the fluidized bed reactor, the vessels containing the fluidized solids, the gas leaving carries some suspended particles. The flux of solid is called the entrainment. So what will happen if you have a fluidized bed reactor here? If these are the these are the bed particles, as you are allowing, say, gas to come inside your reactor, what will happen as you're increasing the gas flow rate? What will happen that this gas is coming inside the reactor, and when this gas is moving inside, along with its movement, it will take the particles also, and then these particles will also move inside that. So that is said to be entrainment. Okay. Now what will happen if the gas velocity is very high? The entire particles may be leaving out of the reactor. That is said to be fully entrained. Okay, that is also not desired. So the bulk density of the solids in this living gas stream is called the holdup. So for the design considerations, this particular understanding this particular concept is very important, and that all depends on the geometry of the vessel, like what is the length of the vessel, what is the diameter of the vessel, whether it is spherical in nature or whether it is rectangular in nature. This fluidized bed reactor can be of various shapes and designs, depending on various designs one has to consider, or depending on the various product concentration, or depending on what type of things one is depending on what type of products one is expecting, or depending on what type of materials one wants to handle. It can be of either a circular type, a cylindrical type, or it can be rectangular type also. Now you could see that whenever you are increasing the gas flow rate, you could see mostly these particles which are in this range, that the bubbles are being formed. You could see that most of these particles are in this range when this velocity is above UMF. When U0 is greater than UMF, little bit greater than UMF, you could see that these bubbles are being formed and most of these particles are moving in this particular range, and then fluidization is happening. And some of the very light particles, you could see it can be in this particular range also. It can keep on moving in this particular range. So this particular range is said to be the dense phase. And this particular range where the amount of the solid particles are very less is said to be something which is said to be lean phase. So there are two phases. One is said to be dense phase and one is said to be lean phase. So in the dense phase, most of these reactions are happening. In the lean phase, some light particles are there and moving inside. So this region at which you could see that most of these particles could move very easily is said to be the freeboard, or the length or the height is said to be the freeboard height. So this freeboard height estimation is also very important, so that freeboard height will also so most of these reactions will be happening here, but some little reactions will be happening here. So freeboard height estimation is also very important. For example, if you are seeing that for a particular fluidization environment, your particles are just moving in up to this particular height in your freeboard. So once you can estimate that your freeboard height is this, say it is around 5 meters, then if you are designing a reactor having 10 meter length, will be of no use, because that particular length will be simply it will just add up to your material construction cost. It will not help in any fluidization behavior. So estimating this freeboard height is also very important as a design consideration, keeping into mind for a particular fluidization environment, till which height your particles can move on. So that estimation is also very important. Okay, moving on, there is another important factor which one has to keep into mind, is something said to be the transport disengaging height. What happens, because of the density of the solid which actually decreases with the height, you could see that here the density is very high and here in this sense the density is very less. Okay, so because of this density of the solids which are decreasing with height in the freeboard region, increasing the freeboard decreases the entrainment from the bed. That means if you're increasing the freeboard height, the entrainment will be decreased, and eventually a freeboard height is reached above which entrainment does not change appreciably, and that height is said to be a TDH height. So you can keep into mind what is TDH height, and this TDH height can be considered indirectly to be a height above which you can't expect entrainment to occur. That means the particles will not be moving up above that, and that will be your design consideration, that what will be the TDH height for your particular reactor, keeping into consideration all other factors. Okay, so this illustration, as I have said, this illustration refers to the separation or removal of fines from a mixture, and it occurs to a lesser or greater extent at all freeboard heights. So this is clear. So this particular range, you could see that you have the dense and the freeboard range. You could see this particular range could also be said to be the splash zone. Okay, and this is said to be the unsplashed zone, you can say indirectly, because this is the zone at which most of these particles are being splashed and mixing with each other. Now let us understand a little bit about how these bubbles are being formed and why these bubble estimation are very important in nature. The last half an hour of today's talk I have kept for explaining how the simulation is working and how this S1+ simulation looks like. So let me quickly finish it off, and then we'll move on into the simulation part. So this bubbling is said to be happening, or these bubbles happen whenever you have an increase in the flow rate beyond the minimum fluidization velocity. So whenever you have the minimum fluidization condition, you could estimate. So whenever you are giving a flow rate which is above the minimum fluidization velocity, or whenever you are giving a velocity of the fluid which is above the minimum fluidization velocity, what happens is that you would see some agitation is there, which becomes more violent, and the movement of the solid becomes more vigorous, and then you could see there are some instabilities or vacant spaces will be formed, which can be said to be bubbles. Okay, now these particular bubbles are having a particular nature, that whenever, say, this is the distributor plate at which the first bubble is being formed here, and as the bubbles are going up, you could see these bubble sizes are increasing. These bubble sizes are increasing, and when it reaches this particular top, it actually expands, or it actually explodes, and whatever particles are there in this particular bubble will actually come down. So when these bubbles are going up, along with these bubbles, it takes some of the particles along with it through the region which is said to be the wake region, and whenever these bubbles are exploding, these particles are also being released into the environment, and as such those particles are also colliding, and that indirectly helps in a good type of a mixing inside the reactor. So bubbling is there, but you can't expect a bubble size to be that much that it becomes sluggish. So a bubbling is preferred till certain extent. Okay, moving on. So here, as I have said, that the bubble size should be calculated, or the bubble size should be estimated, and it should not be that much size that it takes the entire reactor. Like you could see, this so much big bubble, so entire this space is being utilized for no use, for no purpose. Here you could see this particular range is fully vacant, it is not being used for any purpose. So you don't want this slugging to happen, but you can expect bubbling to actually happen till certain extent, and that will also help into good mixing of the particles inside the bed. Okay, now these particles, as I have said, that whenever you have the fluidized bed having the Geldart B, then what happens is that initially you could see that the bubble size is very slow in nature. Bubble size is smaller in nature, and as it keeps on going up, you could see that the bubble sizes are increasing. What actually happens is that it happens due to a phenomena which is said to be the coalescence or coalesce. what will happen? Nearby bubbles will come and join with each other, and the size will increase. So it has been observed that whenever the size of the bubbles are very small, the bubbles rises very slowly, and as the size of the bubbles are increasing, the rise velocity of the bubble is actually increased. And nevertheless, wall effects are also there. This wall effects also is very important factor for studying what will be the bubble size also. So this is how these bubbles are actually moving inside the bed. The smaller the bubble, the lower will be the rise velocity. The bigger the bubble, the bigger size it gets, the bigger drag force it is now able to tackle, and it goes up more quickly. So this is how the bubble actually looks. So this is a fixed bed where, whenever you are giving the flow very slowly, it is passing through the bed is not expanding. You can say it to be a fixed bed. Then when the flow rate is increasing, you could see the bubbles are being formed. Then you have the slugging regime, you have the turbulent regime, you have the fast fluidization, you have the pneumatic conveying. So how this bubble looks, if I take one such bubble from this particular figure, this bubble looks like this. So this is nothing but this is a vacant space, and you could see that this particular region is there having particles, and above this you have a cloud of particles are there. This is how whenever these bubbles are moving up, it takes all these particles along with it when it is moving up, and when it goes up and it gets breaked up, these particles are again released back to the environment, and when it is coming down during that process, it collides with the particles which are actually moving up, and they come and they mix with each other, and that leads to the reaction also. So there are various the formulas by which one can estimate what will be the bubble rise velocity for a particular environment. For example, if you want to simply calculate what is the bubble rise velocity, then one can simply make use of this particular equation. UBR, which is the bubble rise velocity, is 2/3 times G into Rn. This Rn is nothing but it is the radius of the curvature at the nose of the bubble. So if this is the bubble, this radius. So if you take this radius, the center from the center of the imaginary circle to the this tip of this bubble, this radius will give you the value of Rn. So if one knows what is Rn, you can easily estimate what is UBR. But this was the very old formula which was proposed long back, and after that people started working very aggressively on finding out how how much these equations are correct. Then people have started to find out that if dB by dt, which is the diameter of the bubble divided by the diameter of the tower, if it is greater than 0.125, then the bubble rise velocity has to be calculated by using this equation. Sorry, so this is what the wall effects retard the rise of the bubbles when dB by dt is greater than 0.125. That means whenever dB by dt is very high, this bubble rise velocity is being hindered by this wall effects. What are the wall effects? Because when these particles are going up, it is coming down. So some of the particles are coming down along the wall of the column, and when it is coming down along the wall of the column, if any bubbles are there, this bubble rise is being actually hindered by the particles which are going down. But if dB by dt is less than 125, then one can find out the bubble rise velocity using this particular equation. And if the bubble rise velocity is between 0.6 and 0.125, one can use this particular equation. But if one finds dB by dt is greater than 0.6, then he can estimate that this is not a bubbling, but it is a slugging phenomena. So he would say that with this particular geometry, one will not go if dB by dt is greater than 0.6. So then he has to calculate on what is the geometry of the vessel he has to consider, or what is the because dB is there, it can be calculated. dt is something which is in your hand to actually increase or decrease, and accordingly you can estimate what will be the bubble rise velocity and all. So Aspen Plus also makes use of these particular equations to estimate what is the bubble rise velocity and how these bubbles are being formed. So as I have said, small bubbles are there. The small bubbles joins, and then it becomes a bigger bubble, and then these bubbles are coalescing and the sizes are actually increasing. This particular step I'd like to skip, because I have already explained. You basically have an emulsion phase where you have mostly the particles and the gas. You have this is the bubble phase, which is nothing but it is a vacant space, and you have the interface. That means these particles and these bubbles, you have a cloud, which is said to be the interface here. Okay. Now this wake region and the movement of the bubbles, for the paucity of time, because we have to finish by 1:15. So I'm just keeping this particular part here so that we could concentrate more time into how this Aspen Plus is working. How these bubbles are, interacting with each other. Studies have said that if the, perceivable interaction starts when the distance between the nose of bubble 2 and the center of bubble 1. So this is the bubble 2, nose of bubble 2, and the center of bubble 1. If the distance is less than 3 times the radius of the circumscribed circle around bubble 1. So if this is the case, then it has been said that these bubbles will start coalescing with each other. This is actually a very complex phenomena, but people have estimated that if you have this particular situation, then only bubbles are actually coming and coalescing with each other. And how these bubbles are splitting, that is also a very complex phenomena, but generally how bubbles are splitting, you have the bubbles here, one constriction happens here. If this constriction further depends, you could see that now these bubbles are being moving in in these different directions. You have two different bubbles. There are various equations again related to what will be the diameter of the bubble at a particular length of the reactor. For example, if you have a fluidized bed reactor here, and if small bubble is being formed, what will be the velocity UBR could be estimated using the previous equations. Now, what will be the diameter of the bubble? dB naught is the initial diameter of the bubble one can estimate. As you know that when these bubbles are going up, the size will increase. Now, if somebody wants to find out at this particular location, what will be the size of the bubble, then again you have another equation. So that all depends on actually the something which is said to be the N or the LOR value. The NOR is the number of the orifices per unit area. Say if you have a this distributor plate here, say this is one pore, another pore, another pore, another pore. So this is said to be a square array of holes. If you have another plate where you are considering equilateral triangle array of holes, you have to make use of this particular equation. So there are a lot of design considerations one has to consider, and depending on those arrays and depending on those bubble size and bubble spacing, these bubbles are being formed of various sizes. And as it keeps on going up, it's there are a lot of equations by which one can estimate what is the velocity at which bubbles are going up and up. Okay, now let us come to the simulation part. So in the simulation part, as this particular short-term course was mostly concentrated into this CFD portion, CFD part. So this particular fluidization engineering could also be estimated various parameters related to the hydrodynamic parameters, like if the bubbles are being formed, what will be the size of the bubbles, or if the air is being going, how this things are going, if the materials are there, how these materials are moving inside the bed of the reactor, could be easily estimated by ANSYS Fluent. But we are concentrating something on this Aspen Tech, which is said to be an process simulator, due to various other advantages when compared to this particular ANSYS software. For example, this particular, there are various process simulators available in the market, starting from ChemCAD to Aspen Plus to Aspen HYSYS, and there are a lot of other softwares available. What is thus? They are actually very widely used in chemical, petrochemical refineries, pharmaceutical industries, fine chemical industries, biochemical industries, and they are being used very extensively in those industries to actually estimate what are the various parameters. If one changes, what will be the final product output, or what change will happen in the product output. For the faculty members like us who are mostly concentrated into our UG and PG level teaching, it will help as a very effective pedagogical aid to actually explain people about the material energy balances, the fluid mechanics principles, mechanical operations, heat transfer operations, thermodynamics, mass transfer, reaction engineering, process dynamics and control, and even safety and design. So all those stuffs could be very, very easily, if one knows this Aspen Plus, could be used very extensively in that way. So what are the advantages of process simulators? Because of the availability of very large data bank for physical properties and a variety of estimation methods and models for unit operations, one can very easily simulate a particular unit operation, and they can predict what is the final result. But the main drawback of using that type of process simulations is that you already have a large data bank of physical properties and the estimation methods are there. Now, if you're using a pen and paper method to estimate certain, say one reaction has happened and you are estimating this product using the material balance equations or using the various other equations, one can estimate what will be the final, final products or the concentration of the products. Now, that while solving that, we know that the solving those using various numerical equations is pretty difficult, but if one is solving, then he can have a clearly estimate that what all equations he has used and how those equations have been used to derive a particular solution. But using process simulators, you unfortunately don't have that particular thing. What you have to give is that the input conditions, and you have to estimate the appropriate physical properties, and you have to make use of appropriate unit operations, and it will give you the product. So you don't know what is actually happening inside the calculation. So these are basically coding or numerical coding, which is actually solving a lot of complex numerical problems behind your computer or inside your computer, and then it is giving the final products. So if you are having a good data related to the input products, but if you are giving something like estimation methods and the physical properties, if you are not giving it appropriately, or if you have not spent time in estimating what physical property is required or what estimation method is actually required to predict the solution, it will lead to something which is said to be GIGO. That means garbage in and garbage out. So one has to be very much sure about what all physical properties or estimation methods they are selecting from the large data bank which is already available in Aspen. So a good amount of study or good amount of idea one must have. So this modeling and simulation, we all know what is modeling. Modeling is nothing but it is an intimation of reality. A mathematical modeling is a particular form of representation where a real world problem is translated into an equivalent mathematical problem which is solved, and it is then used to interpret our results. And by simulation, we know that a simulation is nothing but it is a mathematical model of a process which attempts to predict how the process would behave if it was constructed. So simulation is nothing but it is a mathematical model of a process which attempts to predict how the process would behave if it was constructed. So after you are creating the model, the flow rates, compositions, temperature, and pressure are assumed for the inputs, and the simulation model is used to predict the outputs. So it is nothing but it is the same pen and paper calculations which one can use. But if you have thousands of various equations are there, and you need to solve thousands of equations, you already know how much time it will take. But this computer-based simulations does that in a fraction of seconds, and straight away it gives you the final result. So simulation can be defined as an experiment performed on a model. So by carrying out rigorous steady-state mass and energy balances with accurate estimates for necessary physical properties, the performance of any process can be predicted with a very reasonable accuracy. Now, there are various advantages of simulation, like designing new processes, evaluating alternate plan configurations, modernizing and revamping your existing plans. You could retrofit inside your plans. You could predict the operating efficiencies, and there are a lot of other uses by which positive uses, I would say, by which one can make use, and they can predict the final things, or the simulation can help them in a lot of way. Now, this process simulation like AspenTech and CAMCAT, as I have said, it is an engineering tool which does automated calculations. It does the mass and energy balance calculations very easily. The physical property estimations could also be done. It could help in the designing and rating calculations, costing of any equipments, process optimization, all those stuffs will be there. So today's talk will be concentrating more into this mass and energy balances, some part of this design calculations and automated calculations. This process, the costing, process optimization, physical property estimations is again vast area which needs almost 1 week time to describe and understand. Now you have the particular flow sheet. This flow sheet, there are various problems related to solving a particular flow sheet. There can be either rating one, it could be either an analysis based problem, it could be a design problem. In a rating problem, what is happening? You have the particular flow sheet. This flow sheet is nothing but you have various unit operations there inside your flow sheet where you are giving the input. You are specifying the operating conditions for those unit operation blocks. You are giving the equipment parameters like what is the size of the size and what are the other parameters related to design of that particular unit operations. And this process flow sheet will, or the Aspen Plus software will actually estimate what will be the output for that particular input and these operating conditions and equipment parameters. This is said to be rating problem. Aspen Plus is also very much useful in this analysis problem also. For example, you have a flow sheet where you are giving the input, you are giving the operating conditions, you are giving the equipment parameters. But this analysis problem is also having an idea of, say for a heat exchanger, you want the output to be say around 80 degrees centigrade. But on incorporating the inputs, operating conditions and equipment parameters, it is coming to be around 100 degrees centigrade, which is not desired. So what you can do in analysis problem, you can simply, you have the luxury of incorporating what is the output which you are desiring. So you could see this particular stream is in, again, you could give the 80 degrees centigrade here. And accordingly, you could also manipulate the operating conditions and equipment parameters, and that will lead you to give an optimized form of what is the data which or what is the design considerations one must consider for solving this particular problem. Coming to the design problem, it is very simple. You have the inputs, and you have the inputs, and you want a particular output. What will be the design? What will be the size of the heat exchanger? Say you have the inputs coming in around say 80 degrees centigrade. You want the output is to work at around say 20 degrees centigrade. So you need a chiller. So what will be the specification of the chiller? What should be the design of the chiller? Is something this synthesis and design problem can easily estimate. So these are the three different problems. We'll mostly concentrate ourselves into the rating problem only, where we'll give the input and the process conditions, and the output will be easily calculated. For example, let me give you a typical example. Say we have an input of methanol water mixture, which you want to separate into methanol stream into a water stream. We know that we can use various unit operations, like we can use a membrane-based separation process, we can use a distillation setup, we could use an absorption-based setup. So what is the separation technique that we can put here? How many unit operations are required? That also we can put it here into the flow sheet. And what is the size of each unit? We can put it here, and we could calculate what is the desired output, or we could manipulate those things to get in the output as only methanol and only water. So all those stuffs are pretty easy in Aspen Plus. Main steps in simulation are, you are defining the problem, then a model is being developed, you collect the data, you solve the model, you analyze the results. Now, unfortunately or fortunately, you would say in Aspen Plus, you have to define the problem, develop the model till certain extent, and then the data collection and all are being done by the computer simulation itself. The model is being solved by the simulation itself, and you are getting the analysis data here. So you don't have the luxury of doing anything over here. So these are done by the computer simulation itself. So you have to be very sure about whether these calculations being done by the computer is correct or not. That depends on the results you are getting, and you have to interpret the results with your understanding, and then only you could actually say that this particular simulation is okay or not. Or if you have a real-time data available with you, or if you have the data available from a plant, you can simulate the same thing inside a computer, and you could validate your answers with your original environment. And if you see that the data has been matched, that means you would have taken the appropriate methods of estimating the property parameters, and that's why you are not getting much error. So these are basically steady state based operations. So anyway, you'll be getting some error. So if the error is in between 5 to 10% limit, then it is still considered to be a good estimated parameter. So once you are validating your data with the experimental results, that will help you up in scaling it, the reactor, or scaling and particle unit operation into a bigger, or scale up or scale down. It can be done very easily. So what information is required? You have the mixture components. You must know what are the unit operations you have to provide, and depending on that, a process flow sheet will be generated. You have to give the data related to the equipment data and the operating data, and the stream data will be coming up from this computer, and this will lead to the formation of results. Results will be there. Okay. So in Aspen Plus, this particular slides I'll skip. I'll be showing it straight away into the computer itself, because we don't have much time with us. These are the user interface of Aspen Plus. Let me straight away go into a particular demo problem, and I would like to explain this problem using the computer. So Professor Bhowmik, are you there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm just shifting myself from this particular slide. I'm stopping this slide and I'm moving on to my computer.
No issue.
Kindly do let me know whether it is visible.
Okay.
So is the slide visible?
Yes, visible.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, so this is how the Aspen looks like. This is how an Aspen looks like. This is the user interface. So let me give you an overview of what we are planning to do using this Aspen. Let us concentrate now into a very simple phenomena. For example, let me start with a very new, very simple kind of an simulation environment where we are simply trying to say heat up some feed streams. Give me 2 minutes till it starts. Professor Bhomik, how much time do I have still?
It's okay, sir. You can take up to 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay. I think I'll need around 15 minutes or so. It takes 2-3 minutes to start with a new one. We have to wait till that. Okay, I think that particular thing is taking more time. For example, let us straight away go into this particular fluidized bed model. For example, say we have a fluidized bed reactor here. We want to design a fluidized bed reactor where we want to separate two different feed materials. One, say we are taking alumina of particular size, and we want to fluidize that alumina particles inside this fluidized bed reactor using air at a particular pressure, and we are trying to heat that air to some particular temperature, and that particular hot air is going inside the fluidized bed reactor, and we are fluidizing the things here. And as I have said, what is entrainment? These particles which are moving out of the reactor, we have to give an flow velocity so that some of the particles which are going out of the reactor is now being passed through a cyclone separator. And what will happen is that you could separate both the streams. From the top you can get the gas out, and here you could separate the alumina particles. So in doing that, what we have to do is that first we have to give the properties. In the property stream, what you need to do is that we have to provide what are the components which are available in this particular, or what are the components which will be encountered in this particular simulation. For example, we have air. So simply this air is being kept here and alumina is here, Al2O3 is there. We have to change it into either conventional or solid. If you're changing it into solid, you have to give a particular particle size distribution. So you must know what is the particle size distribution of your alumina particles, and that you have to provide. And this is the component. Now, once these components are specified, what you have to do, you have to go to the simulation environment. And when you go up to simulation environment, you have to first of all make the flowchart. How to make the flowchart? If you concentrate in the lower part of this particular screen, you could see there are a lot of unit operations available. For example, you have the mixer here. If you want a mixer, you can straight away take the mixer from here. If you want to split a stream into two different, so mixer will help us if you have two or more feed streams which you want to join together into a single stream, you can use this mixer block. If you want to split a particular stream into n number of streams, you can use the split block. You can use the split blocks in other forms also. You can make use of a cyclone separator also for splitting. When you're going to separators, you will have the flash columns. There are a lot of flash columns which are available, which will help you in separation processes. If you want to model and heat exchanger also, you have the various heat exchange operations here. For a normal heater, you have the heater here. If you have a shell and tube heat exchanger, you can use this particular model for estimating or designing an heat exchanger also. So this particular thing will also help in a lot of class-based work. Say if you are solving a problem in a pen and paper for a particular heat exchanger operations, you can straight away use those things into the simulation environment, and you could simulate and you could actually predict what is the final answers. So people or the students will get a lot of interest in that, because they will now be knowing what once they have solved this problem in their pen and paper, then they can easily understand what is actually going behind this particular simulation and how those products are being estimated. Then you have various column reactors like distillation column, extraction column. All those things could be easily used using this particular section. Then you have reactors. Say you have constant state reactor, or you have a plug flow reactor. You can make use of this reactor. So the CSTR and plug flow reactors are there. If you know the stoichiometry as well as the reaction kinetics, then you can make use of this reactor, and these reactors will be estimating for a particular inlet what will be the final product which is coming out of the reactor. If you don't know the stoichiometry, neither the this reaction kinetics, you can make use of the Gibbs reactor. So the Gibbs reactor works on the phenomenon of Gibbs minimization principle, and it will estimate you the final products. If you know only the stoichiometry, but if you don't know what are the kinetics happening, you can use of the stoichiometric reactor. If you know what is the yield of the reaction, you can use of this yield reactor. Accordingly, there are a lot of other reactors which can be used. So using each of the reactor is again a trivial way. One has to know which kind of a reactor one has to use for operating or simulating those things. If you want to say put some pressure into your thing, you can make use of these pumps or compressors, valves, pipeline, pipes. All those stuffs are available here. For manipulators, you have various manipulators like for a particular stream. If you want to analyze what is the input conditions you are giving, so simply you have to put the analyze here. If you want to calculate something at particular location inside your reactor, you can use the calculator block. When you are having solids and you want to handle solids, for example, our case, we have the solids of a particular size having alumina particles which we want to fluidize, and we want to see what should be the design of the reactor. Then one can also make use of this kind of solids unit blocks, where you can have a crystallizer, crusher, screen, CCDs, dryer, granulator, classifier, fluidized bed. If you want solid separators, then you can have the ESPs, the hydrocyclones, the CF filter, and the centrifuge, scrubbing, cyclones. So you have most of the unit operations which are used in industries. You have all the models already available here. The only thing is that you have to give the input parameters. You have to estimate or you have to give the appropriate process condition, as well as you have to estimate by which equations it will be solving, and then it will automatically solve and it will give you. For example, if I am planning to use a splitter, let me take this particular block here and put it. So once you are dragging it here, you get the splitter here. So if you want to put, if you say you have two different materials streaming coming inside, so you see one stream is coming here and the other stream, you can put it again, material This is the second stream coming here, and this combines together and it goes into single product. You get the single product. So you can rename those things as maybe feed 1. Sorry. So it has to be connected. Reconnect destination is here. Okay, so you have one feed stream here and the feed stream here. So you can say this is rename stream feed 1. You have rename stream feed 2. Okay, and then you have another stream. So this is the say rename product PDT product. Okay, say this is a mixer block. You can rename the block as mixer. Rename as mixer. Now, what are these feeds? What are the specifications you need to provide? That is actually another trivial way. We generally provide the data so that it could satisfy the minimum degrees of freedom. So by minimum degrees of freedom, what we mean that if you have n number of components and if you have m number of equations, then the minimum degrees of freedoms required for specifying the data is be the n minus m. So in order to solve this problem and in order to satisfy the degrees of freedom, for example, the first feed which you have clicked, it will ask us to give the temperature. Say this feed 1 is coming at the temperature of 100 degrees centigrade, pressure of 1 bar, and say it is coming at a mass flow rate of say 100 kgs per hour. This you have specified. You would see here that once the unit operation blocks are there, it will show as red or blue. So red says that it is the input specifications are not complete. That means it has not attained the minimum degrees of freedom which is required for it to specify and give the final product output. It has not specified. So here temperature and pressure is there. Flow we have given as 100 kgs per hour, but we have to specify for this particular stream what is the component which we are giving. So the components are already kept as air and alumina. So for example, we want air. It is only air, for example. Say so this is only air. So what we will do, we will put this mass fraction as 1 for the air. That means this particular feed is only air. Okay, you can do in other way also. If you are specifying, if you are not specifying the flow rate here, you can do it here also. Mass flow rate kgs per hour. You have various units also there. In various units you can put, and say mass kgs per hour, we wanted it to be 100 kgs per hour. Once you are done, you could see that it is again blue. So once it is blue, that means the feed specification is complete. You could see that there is another block feed 2. That means it is asking us to give the data related to feed number 2. So once you click the feed 2, it will again give you the data related to the feed. For example, we have a temperature of say around 20 degrees centigrade, say pressure of 2 bar, mass flow rate we are giving it say around 50 kgs per hour. And now we have to specify which particular thing is coming as a feed. In the first one, we had given air. Let us give as mass fraction here. That means, now you see, once we have given this alumina, it has again asked us to give the particle size distribution because this is a solid one. So if I change this property, say we have air and we have say oxygen, or maybe we have methane, say CH4, methane. You could see automatically methane has been selected. And now if you go to the simulation environment, and then if you consider the component to be only CH4, you put CH4 to be 1, and you see this particular things are all in blue. So the minimum degrees of freedom required for specifying this particular operation is also complete. Now what is again required? You have to specify the mixer conditions. So if you want any pressure, 0 pressure bar, that means it will only take the input conditions. It will not specify any, or it will not give any other pressure into that particular feed. So for example, the you want in particular temperature estimate, you can give the temperature estimate here. Otherwise you can simply leave it and then you can run the simulation. I think the license over here is complete. I have to restart the simulation, but for the time being, if you use this kind of an phenomena, and once your input specifications are complete, straight away it will be showing here that your things are complete. and you can run your simulation. How you can run? You have a small run button in the top. You can either put the next input or you have a run here. So if you put the next input, it will straight away simulate it. But because here we have two different unit operations and they have not been connected with each other, it will not give you the product. Rather, let us concentrate into this fluidized bed operation only. Let us see whether it is running. So here, what we have planned, we are so the previous one which I have showed how to make the flow sheet. Once this flow sheet is complete, for example, we are giving primary air here. Okay, so primary air, this is the fluidizing air. We are giving it at a temperature of 80 degrees centigrade and 1 bar pressure. The air is coming in at a flow rate of around 10,000 kgs per hour. The mass fraction is given to be 1 here. That means only air is coming through this stream. Say we are now planning to increase the pressure of this air to say around 1.2 bar, or you can say it to be 1200 millibar. So you can take either it is a compressor or a turbine, and you can select the type. You can be isentropic one, it can be polytropic one, it can be positive displacement one. So accordingly you can collect or you can give the data related to what is the compressor you are using and what is the discharge pressure you are expecting. You give it. Okay, now if you have know the efficiencies, you can keep the efficiencies data also here, and accordingly it will be calculated. Now once this blower is given, this blower will increase the pressure of your primary air, which is coming inside at around 10,000 kgs per hour and 1 bar pressure. So it will increase the pressure to 1.2 bar. And for example, you are interested to increase its temperature further. So what we can use an heater block, and then in the heater block we can either give the heater duty or the temperature change or the vapor fraction. All those stuffs you can give and you can manipulate. And what is the desired temperature you are expecting? For example, you are expecting 80 degrees centigrade. So 80 degrees centigrade will be kept here. And discharge pressure, if you don't want to put any more pressure here, it will automatically calculate the pressure which is already available in its input feed stream, and it will move on. Then moving on, now solids. So this air will be coming inside, we know, but it has to fluidize the particles inside. So we have to incorporate the solids also. So if you click on this solids part, what will happen? It will take you to the input of the solids. So in the solids, say our solid is alumina. Accordingly, you could see that alumina, the mass fraction is 1. And what is the flow rate of the alumina coming inside the reactor? It was given to be around 5,000 kgs per hour, and the temperature of 20 degrees centigrade and 1 pressure. Okay, because this alumina has been selected, you have to specify this particle size distribution. So you must know what is the particle size distribution of your feed materials which is going inside. So accordingly, you have to give the particle size distribution over here. For example, our case, we have considered Geldert A particles, and accordingly this particle size distribution has been given. Okay, so now once this both the feeds has been specified, okay, along with the blower and the heater, what mode you have to specify is the fluidized bed reactor. So here the computer doesn't know what is the geometry of the reactor or what is the reaction environment at which it wants to operate. So first you have to go to the specification, where you have to first of all specify the bed mass. What is the bed mass of your particular bed? What is the voidage at minimum fluidization? It is the same epsilon, which I was saying, epsilon MF. At the minimum fluidization, what is the bed voidage or what is the bed porosity? Generally, we keep it around 0.5 to around 0.55, we put it. And as I have said that we had considered Geldert A, so you have to put either Geldert A, B or D, whatever particles you are having, you can put it here. Okay, Geldert A and B will lead to good fluidization. Geldert D, as we know that the particle size is greater than 1000 microns, so it will mostly lead to sprouting. So we'll concentrate in between A and B. Then if you want to calculate what is the minimum fluidization velocity, as in the previous slide I have showed you, there are various equations by which one can find out UMF or the minimum fluidization velocity. So here, depending on various correlations, one can either use the Venn and U correlation or the Argand's equation to find out what is the minimum fluidization velocity calculation. So the Aspen will be solving the same problem or the same equation which I have showed you previously in the background, and it will estimate what is the minimum fluidization velocity. Accordingly, the TDH model estimation also things are there. So these are the things which you have to give more importance on. Key, what are the estimating parameters you are selecting for solving this particular problem? If you are not selecting an appropriate estimating parameters, then the products or the solution which you will be getting, probably it will not be in the range, or probably it will not be correct. So once you're getting the data, you have to use your own intelligence to actually predict and easily interpret the data whether these things are correct or not. So you have to spend some time into selecting which is the correlation you want to put. So Aspen Plus is having its own database. If somebody wants to study which particular model is important for which particular case, there is one help button, and from the help button there's a big manual, and one can go through the manual and they can find out which particular process conditions one is to take. Okay, moving on, coming to the operations. For example, in the fluidized bed reactor, if you want to give some temperature, you can put some temperature here. So here the duty specified is 0. That means no added temperature is being given to the reactor. So whatever things are there inside, that things are only being considered. Coming to the geometry. Now here these things are very important. For example, this particular case, the height of the column was taken as 6 meters, and the cross section was taken to be a circular one. It can be either circular or rectangular. If it is a circular one, what is the diameter? If it is a constant diameter, then you can put the constant diameter here. If it is a height dependent diameter, that means you have one diameter at the lower part, upper part you have another diameter. You can make use of this height dependent diameter profile here, and accordingly it will estimate and it will solve. Okay. Then coming to the gas distributor, why it is important? As I have said, distributor plate is very important to estimate whether the bubbles are being formed, what will be the bubble size, what will be bubble rise velocity, and what are the other important stuffs which are important for good fluidization it has to give. So Aspen Plus gives you the freedom of selecting either a perforated plate or a bubble cap. There are nozzle type, as you have studied that there are other type of this distributor plates also available, like the nozzle type and all. But Aspen Plus for the time being is giving you the freedom of using either a perforated plate or a bubble cap. For example, if you have taken the perforated plate, then we know we have to give the specification how many number of perforations are there in the plate. For example, in this particular case, it has been said that number of orifices are around 4,000 orifices are there. That means 4,000 small gaps are there by which the air will be coming inside the bed and your particles will be fluidized. Then you have to specify what is the orifice diameter. That means what is the diameter of each of these pores by which this air will be coming up. And there is another discharge coefficient. Generally, we keep it around 0.8. There is another part by which one can determine what should be the appropriate discharge coefficient one must keep. There is a separate calculation. So generally, it varies around 0.8 to around 0.85 and all. Okay. All the specifications are complete. If any reactions are happening inside the reactor, you have to provide those reactions here. For example, if you have a reaction, say, let us make a new reaction here, say reaction 1. You have to give what type of reaction model you are taking. Say you are taking the Powell law. Okay. Now you have to specify this reaction also. Okay. So how this reaction you have to specify, you have to go to you see now this reactions block is showing as red. That means it needs the data. You go to this reactions R1. This is the first reaction. Let us write a new reaction. For example, C plus O2 gives CO2. Let us give the component. Okay, now this component will be the components which have already been incorporated here. So we don't have any component which will mix and give some product. For example, if we are going to the properties and if we are say giving C carbon, we are giving oxygen. Okay, sorry, electro. How you can find? You can also find in this way. You can press this find button, go there and contain oxygen, OXYGEN, and you can search. So it will search the database and it will give you the data, and you have to select that particular thing. I think the license has just been disconnected, so I have to probably start it again. But let me show it how it works. So carbon and oxygen, we have O2. Now you see automatically oxygen has come. So either you can put O2 and put in tab, it will come, or you can use a find button. So now if you go to the simulation environment where you want to specify the reactions, say this is the reaction which you want to specify. For example, we want carbon mixes with oxygen to give carbon dioxide. For example, carbon is there, coefficient is 1, exponent is -1. Okay, reacts with oxygen, -1, you have -1, and then it leads to the formation of O2. Sorry, C plus O2 gives CO2. So have we specified CO2? No, we haven't. So we have to specify CO2 also. Otherwise, it will not take up. So you have to specify C plus O2 gives CO2. So whatever things are encountered in this entire process simulation, you have to specify all those things in the component section, and then accordingly you have to go and solve. Now let us edit it. C plus O2 gives CO2. You have the coefficient 1, exponent can be 0. Now you see your stoichiometry is there. C plus O2 gives CO2. Your reaction is there. Now you have to give the kinetic parameters. So for the kinetic parameters, you have to give what is the K value. You have to give some, you have to estimate, or you have to give the data which is available with you regarding to this K value, the energy, activation energy value you have to give. Okay. Once those data are given, you see that it has also become blue. That means now this reaction is complete. Okay. Now the rate basis can be either catalysis basis or the reaction basis. Reaction phase you could also change, either it can be liquid and solid, it can be liquid one. So accordingly, what all things you are having or encountering, you have to make use and you have to put the data. So once those things are complete, we are left with one more thing, is the cyclone separator. So each and every unit operations you have to specify. So if you go to the cyclone separator, you could see that what model of cyclone you have to use, either a cyclone or a solid separator. What is the calculation method you can take. There are various calculation methods for the cyclone separator also. You can use the appropriate method, you can use the appropriate type. Okay, wall friction coefficient data, if you have to give all those data. If you know the geometry of the, you must know the geometry of the cyclones. For example, if you know the diameter, you have to put the diameter here, and the number of cyclones, if you want, you can put it here. So accordingly, when you have specified all the data and you are running the simulation will actually run. So this particular license has actually stopped, so I think I have to close it and open it up again. Let me see if it opens up. Actually, one laboratory is going on where people are using this Aspen Plus, so I don't know whether this license is still available with me or not right now, but let me have a look. But most of the part I have already explained, so there is some issue probably. Okay, so there is some problem. I think somebody is using the license over here. We have very limited license here. So the main thing is that if you are using this type of a geometry and giving the data, what will it will lead? It will lead to your various property estimates, like what will be your minimum fluidization velocity, what will be your bubble size, what will be your bubble fraction, what will be the height of the bottom portion of your bed, or what will be the height of your upper portion of your bed. All those stuffs it could easily calculate. Let me give one more try if it starts, or else we will just end up. I'm just planning to show you some of the data provided the simulation starts. By the meantime, if there is any questions you want me to address, I would take up those questions. Still the simulation works up. I'll take 5 more minutes to check whether the simulation is starting or not. Else I'll just wind up. Professor Bhaumik, is there any questions which has come up?
So, dear participants, if you have any doubts, so you can ask to Professor Harjit Nath.
You can unmute and you can ask me till I open up this particular thing. Any doubt related to what is Aspen, how, when and all it can be used, how it can be beneficial? I know there will be a lot of doubts because this is an entire 15-20 days based course. whether in this particular small duration, whether it will be feasible for you to understand or not, I'm not very much sure, but still I'd like to address if you have.
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So I think there's some problem with this connection board, because of which we are not getting, but still let me give a last try. Just give me 2 minutes. Let me give a last try, whether these licenses are still available with me or not, or somebody else is using. Okay, if it's not starts, I'll just continue with this particular PDF and we'll wind up in 2 minutes. Just give me a minute so that I could check it starting or not. Okay, till it starts, let me just share this particular slide. So once you are done with your simulation, if you run the simulation, you can actually calculate what is the particle size distribution curve for your particular samples, which is going inside your reactor. So you have the discharge, the entrainment, and the feed. So the red one is the feed, which is going inside your reactor, and the discharge, which is coming out from the bottom part of the cyclone separator. This is the particular distribution of this particular thing. Why it is different? Because we know that some amount of the particles might have escaped from the top of the this particular cyclone separator, and some part of the solids are still there inside the bed. So this might be the reason. Okay, you could now actually get various profiles related to the superficial velocity of the gases going inside the bed, interstitial velocity, the solids volume fraction, as well as the pressure. You can easily estimate using this type of curves. It will give you data related to along the height of the reactor, what is the various parameters related to the various operating velocities and what is happening. If any bubbles are formed, you can get this kind of a curves which will show you what will be the bubble diameter along the length of the reactor. For example, this blue one is basically the bubble diameter. So you could see that this bubble diameter is increasing in this way along the length of the reactor. That means bubbles are being formed, and as long as these bubbles are going up in the dense zone, these bubbles are being formed, and this size could be easily estimated using this particular phenomena or the properties. So Aspen is still misbehaving, and some problem is there. So that's why let me continue with this particular thing. Just excuse. Okay, so these are the outputs which you can easily calculate, and you can actually use those things to find out what is the various results of your final simulation, like what is the inlet gas flow rate, what for that gas flow rate, what is the entrained solids flow rate, what is the discharge flow rate, what is the other parameters related to the pressure drop, and all those things which could be which were otherwise very tough to calculate for each and every simulation. in pen and paper based, those things could be easily calculated using this Aspen Plus. There's also something said to be sensitivity, by which one can easily find out various parameters which can give you an overview of various process situations, process conditions. For example, if you want to say you are varying the feed rate from 1000 kgs per hour to 20,000 kgs per hour. Now you want to check for that 1000 to 20,000 kgs per hour how the flow rate of your final stream is changing. That those things could be easily calculated using the sensitivity blocks. So this is an overview about what are the things one can use in this Aspen Plus, and how this fluidization is now being used very extensively for studying its internal hydrodynamics using this Aspen Plus software. So you can make use of this particular software for your other purposes also, and for academic purposes also. You could cross-verify your particular solution, or for example for studying thermodynamics also, if you want to study what is the VLE for a particular thing, and all those stuffs could easily be simulated in this environment, and it could be solved very easily. So you could give your students a very nice exposure related to what is simulation and how the simulations are working. So I'd stop at this position. Apologies for not being able to show you the final results because of this particular error. But I hope I could give you some idea related to what is fluidization and what is Aspen Plus, and how Aspen Plus works, and what are the various options by which you can make use of Aspen Plus to simulate a lot of unit operations, and a lot of you can actually get your entire plant data, and you can simulate the entire thing in your computer, and you could predict the same thing, and you can give it back to the plant, and you can say that if you're changing these parameters, probably you can get better estimates of your particular products and all those stuffs. So nowadays these are being extensively used in those industries to actually do all those stuffs in the industry itself, which is said to be retrofitting and all. So thank you so much for your kind attention, for your patience. I hope this session was informative, and if you have any doubts, I would just like to drop down my email address in the chat box, harjitnath@chupraenu.in, and if there's any questions, you can drop your mail straight away to me related to either Aspen or fluidization or any of the industrial based things. If you want to get data on, I'll be happy to help. So thank you so much for that. Thank you so much. It's all over to you, Professor Bhumik.
Okay, thank you, sir. It's really very informative. Okay, and we'll definitely arrange a next session for hands-on on Aspen also.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Bye, sir. Bye, sir.
Bye. Bye. So I'm exiting, sir.
Okay, okay, sir.
Okay.
Okay. Dear participants, next session will start at 2:30. Thank you.